It's a very diverse district. 19% of my district is Latino. I have the second largest Haitian diaspora per capita anywhere in the country. I have the largest Irish per capita. You know, my wife is an immigrant. She came to this country in search of economic opportunity and a better life. I've been through this system. It is a broken system. It needs to be fixed. There are things that, Republicans want. There are things that Democrats want. There is an avenue that I think you can get major things accomplished if people are willing to actually legislate.
Welcome to Bare Wires, where we have unfiltered conversation for curious people. My name is Brian Heyman, and I'll be your host. This evening, we'll be talking to one of the most strategic political players that have come out of Rockland in a long time, Mike Lawler. Young, disciplined, and is sitting in one of the most competitive congressional seats in the nation. He flipped a Democratic district and beat a guy who basically was in charge of electing Democrats nationwide. But now he's walking the tightrope between Washington politics and Hudson Valley reality. Is he a true bipartisan problem solver or just a smart operator who understands suburban math? Welcome to Bare Wires. I'm your host, Brian Heyman, and we have a very special guest tonight, Mike Lawler, Congressman, who's done some tremendous things for this area. And we're going to have a nice conversation on how Mike got to where he is today and what he plans to do in the future. So welcome, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Bare Wires. And
appreciate it.
Like all guests, we started at the beginning. I know you were born in Rockland and you grew up in Rockland. What town?
Yeah, so born and raised here. I'll be 40 years old this year. So I've lived here my whole life.
September, right?
September 9th,
Yep.
1986. But no, I was born at Good Sam.
Okay.
Grew up in Nanuet till I was 12.
Okay.
And then I moved to Suffern, Montebello.
Okay.
Went to Suffern High School. Graduated from there. Then went off to Manhattan College. But I came home after college, and my parents had sold their house up in Montebello, so we were in Nyack for a brief stint, Congers, and then I moved to Pearl River. So my wife and I have been in Pearl River for almost 11 years, and this May, it's Rockland County is a great county. It's
so you went to public schools in the county?
Yeah.
Where'd you go to school?
So when I was in
Suffern?
Nanuet, I went to George W. Miller Elementary School, and I was actually that was really a tremendous school growing up, and the most consequential part of my education, honestly, happened when I was in second grade.
Really?
I was in a class. I was one of the youngest in the class because I was a September birthday.
Okay.
And my teacher...
Oh, was that a disadvantage?
Yes. My teacher at the time, her name was Anna Petrov. She was a Russian immigrant.
Uh-huh.
She came to the U.S. I was a teacher there for a long time. And she told my parents that, she recommended that I be left back. And that...
In second grade?
In second grade.
Which is the devastating thing to happen.
Well... as a kid, you don't
right.
fully understand it. But what she said to my parents was, he's very smart, but he's immature. And it would really do him a world of good to be left back. And so my parents said to her, we'll do that if you'll teach him again. And that was not the program. It was called the Gift of Time. And the school would not allow that. They would give you a different teacher. And so my parents really held firm and were like, well, then we're not leaving him back. And the school relented, and so she taught me a second year. And honestly, it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it allowed me to mature. It allowed me to really understand.
Yeah, you recalibrated.
Yeah.
You were where you were supposed to be.
Yeah. And so it really worked out for the better for me as I progressed in school. And then when I was 12, we moved to Montebello. I went to Suffern. And Suffern was
High School?
Yeah, Suffern High School. Very good school system, and I had tremendous teachers there, and graduated in 2005. Then went to Manhattan College, and
when you're in, so your early influences of, let's say, were your parents involved in politics?
No.
Did they have anything to do in politics? So where did this come? Did it come as soon as high school? Did you think about politics in high school? Did you run for school government?
Yeah, so actually when I was in fourth grade, I think I ran for class president in Nanuet.
Okay, so there's something there.
I finished second. No, it was really, it was 9/11. I was in my fifth day of freshman year of high school on September 11th, 2001. And that obviously was a consequential moment in history, but as a high school student,
what are you going to do?
It really rocks your world. And, I think so many of my classmates and I, were very much impacted by what happened, not only on 9/11, but in the aftermath. And, obviously 2 wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. And so I got very interested in politics in the 2004 election because I was left back. I was one of the few people who was old enough to vote in the 2004 election.
Right.
So I was 18. I turned 18 just in time for the election so I could vote. And then when I went to college, I paid attention, but it wasn't at the forefront until the 2008 election came around. And so that's really where I got very interested in politics, watching both the Democratic and the Republican primaries. It was an open seat. The president was termed out. Vice President Cheney was not running.
Right.
So you had open primaries on both sides. Yeah, but it was a free-for-all,
right?
And then obviously you had Obama versus Hillary and McCain surging and coming back. And so I ended up being an intern for John McCain while I was
I didn't know that
in between my junior and senior year of college. And that's really how I got started in politics.
Okay, so there was no other influence before that. That was really the first step into the into the game.
My parents were. They paid attention to politics. They were aware of what was going on, but they weren't involved.
So it wasn't a topic of conversation at dinner or anything.
Yeah, we talked about issues. We talked about what was happening in the world, but they weren't involved in party politics. They weren't, going to meetings, things like that. So I was not engaged in that way. As I look back on my family history, though, my great-grandfather, or my great-grandmother's father, my great-great-grandfather, he was a Democratic committee man in Tammany Hall.
Oh, wow. That goes
in
way
New York
back.
City. So it's, there's...
Must be in the blood somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere.
So you're in college. Is it... When you got involved with Rob Astorino, were you in college at the time?
No. So that was 2014 when I ran his campaign for governor against Andrew Cuomo. I had already worked at the state Republican Party.
Just so people know, Rob Astorino was the Westchester County executive at the time. I think he served like 10 years or something.
2 terms, 8 years.
Okay, 8 years.
So we, I had... Post McCain, I went to work for Ed Cox at the state Republican Party. I was his scheduler, his assistant, his driver, and that's how I kind of worked my way up. And ultimately, I became executive director of the state Republican Party. And then I left that to go run Rob's campaign in 2014 for governor. Ultimately, he lost.
Right.
But then I went to work for Rob in the county executive's office over in Westchester.
Oh, so you were over there for a while.
I was there for about a year and a half, and then I went out on my own.
So you got to see how the politics works from the back, looking out front, and you're saying to yourself, okay, this is something I may want to get into. I may be interested in it. I may want to run sometime. When did you say, besides being an operative for another candidate, did you say to yourself, maybe I should run. Maybe I should put my name in the hat, because you do soon after that for the assembly.
Yeah. So especially being a consultant and helping elect a lot of people to public office, there was definitely...
What was the name of the company?
Checkmate Strategies.
I just want to ask you a question. Were you a big chess player?
No, we both, Chris Russell and myself, he was my business partner. We both just were, spitballing names. And
I just wanted to know if that was derived from actually playing chess or just sounded great.
Just sounded great.
Okay, good.
But we, having helped elect so many people to public office, there came a point a few times where I was like, if that dumbass can get elected, I can definitely get elected. But
you're not the only one that says that.
But I very much I always thought I would run for office at some point. I mean, I as a kid, I certainly would engage people. I would always talk to adults. I was never shy,
right.
In that way. And I just, fundamentally enjoy that level of engagement. So, when I was thinking about running, I never knew what I would run for. But sometimes when the opportunities present themselves, you either take the chance or you don't.
Right.
You either meet the moment or you don't. And so, the opportunity arose. I had, in addition to having my own business and doing consulting and lobbying, I was serving as deputy town supervisor in the town of Orangetown. I was town Republican chair at the time. And, I really had helped elect a lot of people throughout the county. And so the opportunity arose to run against Ellen Jaffe in the state assembly seat in 2020, and I
remember that.
I announced literally a week before COVID. And
she was. How long was she in the assembly before you?
14 years.
Right. I remember she was. I had actually met her right around that time. She was getting up in age and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
she was 77 when I ran against her.
Right. Yeah. And she was actually, her office was right there in New City. For some reason, I was on a nonprofit, met her. But you saw an opportunity, you saw an opening to make a difference there, and you ran and you won. Now, when you get to Albany, what as a Republican, what do you see there?
Look, you're in the permanent minority, if you will. But, and oftentimes people say, oh, you're in the minority. What can you do? Well, you can do a lot.
Can you?
All right. Part of it, being in elected office, number one, requires showing up.
Right. Be
present, engage, be in the community, go to events. And I really changed that dynamic here in Rockland. A lot of electeds, especially at a state and federal level, would not show up to everything. They would kind of be a little bit removed. We have great local electeds like George Homan or Teresa Kenny.
George doesn't miss anything.
Amy Stan, they're showing up at everything. Right. And Howie Phillips in Havistraw, they show up at everything. And that's what you should do. But a lot of times state and federal were kind of removed from this.
Why do you think they did that at that time? Do you feel like they didn't want to be exposed at those, or they were just lazy, or what's the?
No, I think some people are certainly lazy. I think other people, they don't want to have to answer for what is going on up in Albany or in Washington, and they don't want to have to actually articulate how they voted on an issue.
Okay.
And so I really jumped right in and started talking about the votes that were actually taking place up in Albany and making it, clear to people on social media, doing videos, doing interviews, doing press, and debating the bills on the floor, clipping those debates and posting the videos and informing people of what was actually going on up there. And so you can have an impact because it forces the majority party to start to have to defend or explain or
makes them accountable.
Not vote.
Or makes them accountable for the things they do vote for.
Correct. And so, whether it was issues like cashless bail or, energy policy or tax and spending policies, I was pushing back on a lot of this. And so, I was only there one term. But in that, first year, I really started to make a name for myself in Albany, but also, in our community where people say, oh, okay, I don't agree with him on everything, but I like that he's out there, that he's communicating, that he's showing up everywhere.
Was that the impetus to go the next step, which took everybody by surprise, quite frankly, when you decided to run for, this seat and, all of a sudden you're running against a guy that, basically was responsible for getting Democrats elected in a pro-Democratic or Biden-tilted electorate, But you must have seen something or realized something was happening that you said to yourself, listen, this isn't what it seems to be. There's something here that I see that a lot of people don't see. How did that come about, and what was the impetus for that?
Well, I think, just to put a fine point on the assembly stuff, I passed more bills than anybody in my conference in the 2 years that I was there. I brought back a lot of money. We were able to get statewide bills passed because I put public pressure on. And so I kind of put myself in a position where people noticed and they took me seriously as an elected official, even being in the minority. And so what happened, I never thought I'd be in Congress, and I never thought I would necessarily run for Congress. But redistricting happened after the 2020 census. Democrats controlled everything in Washington, Albany, and New York City for the first time in the history of our nation.
Wow.
It had never happened. They had never controlled every facet of government all at once. And so when you look at what was going on up in Albany, they gerrymandered the map. They tried to jam through a hyper-partisan gerrymandered map that put Republicans at 4 seats out of 26.
Wow.
And so when I was executive director of the state Republican Party, we had fought to pass the constitutional amendment banning gerrymandering and requiring an independent redistricting commission. So, kind of comes full circle. I'm now in the assembly. I vote against the maps. I rail against it. And I say, this is unconstitutional. You're going to lose in court. And Ed Cox, who was my old boss, fought to bring the lawsuit and, fund the lawsuit and build out the team to challenge the maps. And ultimately, we got a court ruling that threw them out, declared it unconstitutional, said it was gerrymandering and violation, and ordered a court-appointed special master to draw the map. And so I was sitting on the floor of the assembly. It was May 16th of 2022. And my wife and I had just had our first daughter a month earlier. And so, I'd already announced I was running for re-election to the assembly, and I was on a glide path to being reelected, even though it's a 2-to-1 Democratic assembly district.
People don't understand that, but
I was in a very good position, and ultimately the map comes out while I'm sitting on the floor, and I pull it up and I click District 17, and I see all of Rockland, and I see everything north of the Tappan Zee Bridge, excluding Greenberg and White Plains in Westchester, and I see all of Putnam County, and I see 3 towns in Dutchess County. And because I know the area very, very well, and I've helped elect a lot of people over the years all throughout, I just looked at it. I was like, I could win that.
Wow.
And so I sent a picture of it to my wife, and she just writes back to me on text. She goes, I don't care what you run for as long as you win.
Oh, very nice.
So 5 days later, I announced I was running for Congress, and then we went on to do what many thought was impossible, and we took out the chair of the DCCC for the first time in over 40 years.
Yeah, and it was, at what point did you say to yourself, other than when you looked at the map, but as this thing was getting down to the wire, did you have confidence? You're a strategic guy. You could read, the tea leaves, and you said to yourself, at what point did you say, I think I got this? Because it wasn't a big margin when you won. No. It was very, very tight. Okay, but at what point did you say to yourself, okay, this is going to go my way?
So you gotta think back to that time period. Mondaire Jones was the sitting member of Congress,
right?
And he moved from Rockland to White Plains. Right. White Plains was no longer in the newly drawn district. Putnam County was, and Sean Maloney lived in Putnam County. So Sean Maloney immediately says, I'm running for the seat that I live in, even though the vast majority of his district was in District 18.
Okay.
And so it created a scramble on the Democratic side, and Mondaire ultimately decided to go run in New York City rather than stay and fight for this district. And so when that dynamic happened, I knew I had a very good shot because Maloney had pissed off a number of people in doing that. But moreover, Maloney only represented 25% of the new district.
Right.
I represented 20% as a state assemblyman.
So with
my
the new-
entire assembly district was in the district.
So with the new district lines, you understood that you had an opportunity.
He didn't have as big of an incumbent advantage as you normally would have. And so when I decided to run, nothing in life is guaranteed, and nobody's ever handing you a congressional seat. But I fundamentally believed I was going to win from the moment I announced. And we did 3 polls over the course of the election. I was up 2, then 4, then 6.
Wow.
And on election, once all the results were in, I won by about less than a point. It was about 0.6.
It was raised.
It was 1,800 votes. Yeah. But I fundamentally believed that I was in a position to win. And, in the final 2 weeks, that's when the money poured in. Kevin McCarthy dumped in $4 million. And then Sean Maloney, as chair of the DCCC, working with Nancy Pelosi, moved $5 million out of other races to defend himself.
But it was too late?
It was too late.
Yeah, I figured.
Didn't matter.
Yeah, so, strategically, I think, just going through your story, you were able to look at these situations, with a strategic mind that says, okay, this is how this is going to lay out. And I think a lot of the past history that you had before you got to this point probably helped you to figure this whole thing out. This is a chess game. I mean, it really, it's the issues, in the suburban areas, the issues aren't black and white. I mean, a lot of people may be Democrat, but their overall situation may lean more towards conservative than you would think. And I think that's what you read. You said, I think this is going too far left. I think I can bring some of these independents, certainly the independents voted for you, but I think I could even bring some Democrats back to me because I don't think they're ready to go as fast as the Democratic Party's going to the left.
In all of my elections, I've won over 20% of the Democrats.
Okay.
And look, my district has 80,000 more Democrats than Republicans by registration. It's home to the Clintons and George Soros. It's not a Republican bastion by any stretch. Harris, Biden, and Clinton all won my district over Donald Trump. And yet I won. Now, why? If you look at it, I think it's a few things. One, it's relationships. I have relationships across the entirety of this district. My family has been in Rockland County for over 100 years.
Okay.
And so that dynamic matters. And if you know your district, if you know the people, if you know the communities, if you build relationships with the elected officials across the political spectrum, and I have very good relationships with most every elected official in the district. If you are doing the constituent service work, I have a tremendous staff. They do a phenomenal job closing constituent cases. We've closed over 8,000 cases since I came to Congress, bringing back over $45 million to constituents in benefits they're due from the federal government. Some of these cases languish for years.
Right.
And we get in and we just plow through and force a resolution. I show up in every community. I did over 1,200 events last Congress
There's
in
no
person.
doubt that you have exposure. I mean, you're all over the place.
No, and on top of it, I do an obscene amount of press. I mean, I am on every network. It doesn't matter. You can ask me whatever question you want. You may not like my answer, but I'm going to answer the question. And I think fundamentally communicating with people, being present, building strong relationships, and telling people where you stand. Nobody ever has to guess where I stand on an issue. Again, you may not like my stance. You may disagree with it. But I articulate where I stand on everything. And, frankly, I probably provide more detail than people ask for at times. But to me, that's fundamentally part of the job, is to be able to communicate what you're doing and why.
Well, I think that
and
goes
take tough positions.
Yeah, I think that goes a long way. People seem detached from politics. They don't think they can. They're not connected with it. They think that things go on beyond them, and they have no touch or no feel or no opinion. And if they do have opinion, no one's listening anyway. And when you start to reach out and touch them, and actually have a relationship with individuals, they gravitate towards you because they understand that you're just another person trying to get things done, on an everyday basis. But the politicians that separate themselves from the public are very difficult to get in touch with. People don't feel like they're being listened to, and that's very frustrating. And that goes on a lot. And I think your ability to touch everybody in Rockland certainly is a big plus for you to get reelected. Now, the next election you go to, you win by a much bigger margin against, who was that?
Mondare. He came back.
He came back, and
the grass was not greener in New York City. Apparently,
That's right. Now, I have a real question for you. You're on two committees in Congress, and you're a young guy, and I don't. These are two primo committees. They make a lot of decisions. They involve markets. They involve global strategic outcomes. They involve money. Foreign Affairs Committee is a huge committee, and the other one is the House Foreign Affairs and the House Finance Service Committee. And I'm like, how does this guy just get into Congress and get into these committees? How did that come about? I know you have a finance background, so one of them
I went to school for accounting and finance, right. And I certainly, am
valedictorian of your class, by the way, up in Manhattan College.
I certainly am interested in finance, and I think obviously our financial markets are vital to our success as a country. Our financial markets are what drives our power, and if you look at those two committees in particular, they're interconnected, and they're serious, substantive committees.
Usually, these committee assignments go to people that have been in Congress for some time.
For sure. Look, in Congress, there used to be a lot less turnover than there is today. Okay. I mean, people are not staying like 30, 40 years like Nancy Pelosi is retiring after 40 plus years in Congress.
Yeah, I saw that.
Chuck Schumer's been in elected office for 50 years. It's time to go home.
Right.
But there's more turnover today. So there is more opportunity on committees like this. However, look, I came in having defeated the chair of the DCCC, and they knew the target was going to be on my back, and
Absolutely.
so they certainly try to help members that are in swing seats. Number one, number two, because I'm from New York. I have about 30,000 financial service sector employees in my district.
Okay.
They certainly understood the importance of having a New York member on the committee. So it's Andrew Garbarino and I are on that committee. But when Kevin McCarthy was going through his speaker battle, I came in and started swinging pretty quickly at Matt Gaetz and pushing back against the lunacy. And Kevin appreciated that. And, I believe in loyalty. I believe, you stick with the one who brought you to the dance. But
he didn't survive that.
Not in the end,
right.
But we got through the 15 rounds, and he did become speaker. And so, he made a point of supporting those who supported him. And, he asked me, in addition to financial services, was there anything else that I was looking for? And I said, look, I need a waiver to get on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and I would like to be on that. And so he and Chairman Mike McCall at the time, he was the chair. They said yes, and so with my district, it's a very diverse district. 19% of my district is Latino. I have the second largest Haitian diaspora per capita anywhere in the country. I have the largest Irish per capita anywhere in the country. Obviously one of the largest Jewish populations anywhere in the country. And the district has had two members serve as chair of the committee. Okay. Ben Gilman,
right,
who previously represented all of Rockland County, and Elliot Engel, who represented a portion. And so the district is used to having a voice on foreign affairs. And so it worked out for me to be on both. And this Congress, I'm still on both committees, and I chair the Middle East and North Africa Subcommittee. And so obviously there's a lot going on in this
say the least,
past year plus in the Middle East. And so it's been fascinating to be in the middle of that, as a member of Congress.
With that said, there's been so much polarization between the parties. There are times when you disagreed with the party. I mean, I don't know if you want to tell the story now, but when you went for the salt tax exempted, we were in a couple meetings and you acted out how it went, which was very amusing. But that was very important to the district here. It was very important to New Yorkers, and that goes a long way because that was a crucial decision that you had to make. It was either to go with the bill as is or not go with the bill, and that vote that you had was a critical vote. And then, so when you push back to the point, I know you're friends with Mike Johnson, and you guys are good friends. We've seen you together. I've been together with both of you, but there are times when you have to push back, and how does that lay out?
Yeah. No question. And look, the job of a member of Congress, first and foremost, is to represent their district.
Right.
I fight like hell for this district. And I can tell you, there's 435 members of the House. That means there's 435 opinions. And you're not going to get everything you want. But you have to be able to negotiate. You have to have a seat at the table, and you have to be able to negotiate towards a resolution. Just screaming no or screaming orange man bad is not going to get you anywhere. And so to me, fundamentally, I look at what the job is, and I am always looking towards how to get a solution. And in this instance on salt, I was very clear from the moment I came in that I would never support a tax bill that didn't lift the cap on salt. And I was relentless about it. I was relentless in the press. I was relentless with my colleagues. And I didn't give a shit if I pissed anybody off along the way or if they had hurt feelings that I was being very direct. First and foremost, I'm a New Yorker.
Right.
I'm going to be blunt and direct, and you're going to know where I stand and why. And, ultimately we did have a back and forth with the president. And I really understood at the end of the day, this was going to come down to getting the administration on board because there were only 5 of us out of 220 in the House that wanted to do this.
Right.
And so we were outnumbered. But you needed 218 votes to pass anything, which means you needed my vote.
Right.
And so,
but that seems to be the case a lot.
It is, and you gotta be able to pick your battles and know how to use that effectively. If you try that on every issue under the sun, it will backfire on you.
Okay.
So you got to be able to legislate. You got to be able to negotiate with your colleagues in good faith to get to a resolution. And I went directly to the president and engaged on this issue, and in a way that really benefited our district. We got the single largest tax cut in the entire bill was the issue of salt.
Right.
And it has been raised from a $10,000 cap to a $40,000 cap, a quadrupling. 93% of my district will be able to fully deduct their state and local taxes. People are already filing right now, and they're sending me text messages or calling me or sending me an email saying, I can't believe it. I got a $15,000 tax refund. And that's a big win for our district. It's a big win to address the issue of affordability. New York is expensive. And Democrats control everything in Albany, everything in New York City. You got Zohran Mamdani talking about raising taxes by $9 billion in the state, or a 9.5% property tax increase. So getting this win on salt was imperative to really try to offset some of the cost of living problems here in New York that really is the driver of why people are leaving New York in droves. It's not because of the weather. Yeah, it's cold. Yeah, it's snowy.
Right.
But the fact is they're leaving because they can't afford to live here. And that is something that we're trying to tackle at a federal level. And SALT was a big win.
Yeah, and that's probably not the only issue. There's a number of issues that you've bucked the Republican Party. You consider it a moderate, and it is. There's certainly for abortion. They wanted a national ban on abortion. You weren't for that. You felt it was a state issue, which makes sense. And you have exceptions there. When you do these things, how much pressure do you get from your party? Is somebody knocking at your door, say, "Mike, we got to talk"? Or how does that work in the back room and say, "Listen, Mike, what are you doing? We're all doing this, and you're doing this."
So I'm very upfront. I don't mince words. I don't lie.
Right.
I don't try to play coy. My position is my position. I will always negotiate. I will always sit down in good faith and have a conversation. But there are things that I've been very clear that I just will not do. And that certainly, I think has been fruitful. And there are a number of my colleagues that share similar perspectives on things. And we're able to really work through these issues and, in some instances, prevent something from happening. In other instances, negotiate towards a resolution that we can accept. And you have to focus on kind of three things. One, what are your core beliefs? What are your core visions? People often, the Democrats will say I'm MAGA Mike. The Republicans will say I'm a rhino. No, I'm myself. And people many times will say, "Oh, well, you're a moderate. You're a squish. You don't have a firm view." That's not it. I have firm views. Sometimes they don't align with others in my party. Many times they do. But the fact is, you have to be firm about what you believe, but not to the point of just being obstinate. Like you see with somebody like Thomas Massey, it's just obstinance.
Right.
It's I'm going to prove a point and just say no. That's not governing. My Democratic colleagues who literally, no matter what Donald Trump does, they scream and yell and say he's wrong. That's not governing. It's not serving your constituents well. It's not actually getting a resolution to these issues. I've said many times to my Democratic colleagues, Donald Trump was a Democrat for 40 years from New York. He supported many of you. The fact is, he cares about negotiating. He wants to cut a deal. If you actually engage in a constructive dialogue, you will get more than you think you will just by yelling and screaming in opposition. And so this is where, from my vantage point, when it comes to my party, there's a lot of things that I agree with. Yeah, secure the border, deport criminal aliens. But I also believe we need to fix our broken immigration system.
Absolutely.
I support Ukraine and have been very firm in my support for Ukraine. You look at the ACA, an enhanced premium tax credit. I voted to discharge the bill to extend that for 3 years because we couldn't get a bipartisan compromise on the floor for a vote. And I fundamentally believe doing nothing was not an answer. And so, yeah, there are times I piss people off in my party. But the fact is, I'm here to represent my district. I'm not here to be a rubber stamp for my party. And I do what I think is right. And I fundamentally believe, country above all else. And that is a responsibility of every elected official.
So let's talk about some other things. It seems like every other day there's going to be a shutdown, okay, in government. How do we get around this constant threat of the United States shutting down the government? I mean, this is something that people, are just crazy about, fed up with, and they just can't make sense of it. So, and I understand why they can't make sense of it. They elect you to go make decisions, make compromises, do the job, and we find ourselves in a position more than not lately of shutting down the government. So what can we do to prevent that from happening? I mean, there's been there's been ideas, okay, stop paying Congress or stop paying the politicians, and maybe they'll come to a conclusion faster. But what are the real solutions to stop shutting down the government?
So there's a few things. One, I fundamentally believe government shutdowns are idiotic. They don't solve anything. They don't actually address the fundamental issue that you're fighting over. All they do is inflict pain and unnecessary, economic impacts on federal employees.
Yeah, but not anybody in Congress,
No, well, listen, when we've had shutdowns, I've not taken my pay. I fundamentally believe if you shut the government down, you should not be paid.
So how do we get a law passed? How do we get a law passed like that?
No, so I signed on to legislation that would do that. But one of the things that I believe the way to stop this is to actually pass a bill that automatically continues government funding at the current level. Yep. So if the appropriations expire on September 30th at midnight, you would automatically stay at the current levels until a new deal is reached.
Right. Whenever that is.
Right. And so instead of having to scramble to pass a continuing resolution to keep government funded, it would automatically do it. Some people believe that this is leverage. And, Chuck Schumer, the reason I was so critical of him over the 43-day government shutdown, this is the same person who for years said shutting down the government is wrong. It's bad. You shouldn't do it. And then he went and did it because he's getting hammered by the left flank of his party, and he's worried about a primary from AOC. And so he goes out there and he shuts the government down. And now we have another government shutdown on the Department of Homeland Security over ICE. Well, ICE is funded through 2029. So you're not actually impacting anything here. What you're doing is you've shut down Homeland's, overall operations. You've shut down the Coast Guard. You've shut down FEMA. You've shut down TSA. You've shut down the Secret Service. That's foolish. And given the situation in the Middle East right now, it is imperative that we fully fund the Department of Homeland Security. God forbid something happens on our homeland. Under the Biden administration, you had hundreds of people come across the border that were on the terror watch list among the 10.5 million people that flooded into the country. And this is just a reality.
Yeah, well, that horse is already out of the barn. Those people are in this country.
Oh, yeah.
Okay? So how do, everybody's pointing their finger at somebody else, but legislation should have been passed a long time to have stringent entry criteria to come into this country. Okay? Yep. We need immigration. Immigration serves a purpose in this country. It always has.
Yep.
But no, why is Congress reluctant to tackle that issue? By not tackling it, left the door open for what happened during the Biden administration, which was crazy.
Both parties have used immigration as a bludgeon and a political weapon for 40 years. Not since 1986 has immigration been reformed. I fundamentally believe that there's a common sense path forward. President Trump was right on the issue of securing the border. He was right on the issue of deporting criminal aliens. He has effectively won those two issues. The American people agree with him. But they also believe there needs to be sensible immigration reform. And so you have two areas to tackle. One is the undocumented, and the other is the legal immigration system moving forward.
Right.
So the president has effectively secured the border. You've had 9 straight months of net zero illegal border entry into the country. And he was right. He deported 675,000 migrants last year, 1.9 million self-deported. So we're starting to chip away at the mess that Joe Biden created by allowing 10.5 million people to flood into the country. But you still have people who have been in this country for 5, 10, 15,
Absolutely.
20 years who are undocumented, whose children and grandchildren are likely American citizens. And so if they haven't committed a crime, if they are working, if they pay a fine, if they pay any back taxes owed, if they don't collect government benefits, I believe there should be a legal pathway forward. It does not mean citizenship. It does not mean the right to vote. It means a legal pathway forward so that you can come out of the shadows, you can pay your taxes, pay a fine, and work legally. If you commit a crime, you're out. And that's something that I think most Americans would agree is a reasonable path. Again, for people who have been here more than 5 years. So if you came during the Biden years, you don't qualify for this.
Right. But it seems to me with the border shut down, with everybody looking at immigration, it's prime for you guys to come to an agreement going forward on something very similar to what you just said. And I think most Americans reasonable think that's great.
We have the bill. It's a bipartisan bill, the Dignity Act. And I also believe there's other things we can do, including banning sanctuary cities. I think sanctuary cities are absurd. What happened in Minneapolis was entirely preventable. The Minneapolis Police Department was prevented from cooperating with federal officials on things like crowd control and traffic control. Those protesters, they have a right to protest. They never should have been anywhere within vicinity of the ICE agents or any ICE operation. They never should have been able to get in their face, try to block the roads. That is why you saw that conflict, and it never should have happened. And so from my vantage point, the sanctuary policies, throw that as part of the bill.
Well, these are ripple effects from the Biden administration of letting all these immigrants.
No question.
These are just ripple effects. What I'm saying to you is, why can't we sit down and say, listen, we understand the value of immigration. This country needs that. They need the workers. They need the people. It's been a country of immigration since day one. Why can't we just, like so many other things.
Those conversations do happen, and that's why we have more people on the Dignity Act than we did last Congress, because people are realizing, okay, we got to do something here. The immigration issue from a macro level is paramount. We have a population decline projected over the next 5 decades. The baby boomer generation has reached the age of retirement, which means that Social Security and Medicare outlays are going up. If you don't have the workforce to backfill this and to support that system, it's going to collapse. On top of that, our birth rate has declined from 2 children per woman to 1.66 in 15 years. The marriage rate among 30-year-olds is in the teens. So we have a real crisis brewing here. We have a shortage of doctors, nurses, home health aides, ag workers, construction workers, hospitality workers. And you have to have a functioning immigration system. And what the Dignity Act does is it deals with the border, it deals with the undocumented, and it fixes the legal immigration system so that it is a merit-based system that addresses the economic needs of our country. I don't care where somebody comes from. 100% of the people could come from Central and South America. I don't care. The issue is not about who or where. The issue is, what are they doing to contribute to the country economically, as opposed to what we saw under Biden, where the social safety net was overwhelmed and you had billions of dollars being spent on free housing, clothing, food, education, and healthcare for 10.5 million people. And cities like New York were crumbling under the weight of it.
So, and that in turn promoted the sanctuary cities. Everybody has an opinion on whether they should be here or not. But if you had a system that could vet people as they come in, and a system that, like you said, if you've been here for more than 5 years, and you're a productive citizen, you should have a pathway to be able to stay in this country. But it seems like people are using this as a mechanism to get what they want instead of trying to solve the problem. How close are you to passing a bill like that you talked about?
Look, it's in order to become law, it's going to need the buy-in of the president. It's going to need a real negotiation. I think the framework of the bill is there. I think, a lot of folks on the right will say it's amnesty. It's not amnesty. But you can't do nothing. Doing nothing is not an answer. You're not going to round up 25 million people and kick them all out. And, my wife is an immigrant. She came to this country. It's illogical, and it's not realistic, and it's not honest. And I think, my wife is an immigrant. She came to this country in search of economic opportunity and a better life. I've been through this system. It is a broken system. It needs to be fixed. There are things that, Republicans want. There are things that Democrats want. There is an avenue that I think you can get major things accomplished if people are willing to actually legislate. And the biggest problem in Congress and the biggest impediment to getting big things done is the gerrymandering, because most seats are not competitive. I'm one of only a handful of members that are actually in a competitive seat in a general election. So the vast majority of members placate to their respective bases as opposed to actually trying to govern in the middle.
Okay, so what you're saying is that they're not being held accountable by their constituents.
The way the maps are drawn, their constituents are happy with what they're doing because they're placating to them, as opposed to trying to bridge some of those divides.
Okay.
I have people who show up at my town halls screaming that I don't do enough, that I don't stand up, that I don't push back. They don't care what I have to say. They don't actually want to listen to the answer. But I always chuckle because they'll say, he's not really bipartisan. And I'm saying to myself, if I'm not bipartisan, who the fuck is?
Forget about it.
I mean, and certainly the people they want to support against me are not going to be bipartisan. And so it's just, it's like a vicious cycle. But we gotta break through this, and there needs to be reforms in Congress. You need term limits. You need to ban gerrymandering. You need to ban stock trading. There's reasonable reforms that I think would actually make the institution function much better.
What do you vision as term limits? What would you think term limits looked like?
I generally broadly believe that if you can't accomplish what you want to accomplish in a decade,
okay, so
whether it's 5 2-year terms in the House or 2 6-year terms in the Senate, at the end of the day, I don't believe this should be a career. It is a public service. It is a wonderful job. I love what I do. I love the opportunity to serve, to represent my constituents, to be involved in consequential decisions that are being made, whether it's on tax policy or financial services, housing, obviously the Middle East, Israel, Iran. In 3 years, I've been able to be in the middle of so many different things, and it's just been a wonderful opportunity. But if I'm doing this at 80 years old, kill me.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
It's funny that you brought it up because it was in 1979. The overthrow of the Shah in Iran was at the time, and I was alive. You were probably not even a thought at the time.
I wasn't.
Okay, but here we are.
My parents hadn't yet met.
50 years later, and you're in the middle of this. Okay, what do you see happening in Iran? Do you think that this is, hey, listen, we slapped you on the wrist, don't misbehave, or are we really looking at a revolution here? And if you are looking at a revolution, how are the people going to? They have no guns to speak of, so how would they sustain a revolution long-term basis?
Here's I think kind of the misnomer of this whole discussion. Iran has been at war with the United States for 47 years. Going back to the Iran hostage crisis,
right?
The bombings in Beirut, the Marine barracks. You look at, obviously, their financing of terrorism around the globe, the deaths of hundreds upon hundreds of American soldiers in Iraq as a result of the roadside bombings that they were responsible for. You look at the role Iran has played in this unholy alliance with Russia and China, the illicit oil trade with China. That is what has financed their ballistic missiles program, their nuclear ambitions, their financing of terrorism, the oppression and slaughtering of their own people. You look at what they were doing in Ukraine, sending Russia the drones needed to bomb in Ukraine. I will not shed a tear at the death of the Ayatollah, and I will not apologize for the decision that President Trump made to remove the threat. This has been a threat posed for 47 years that presidents of both parties said they would deal with.
Absolutely.
Both parties said they would never let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Both parties said that the Ayatollah could not remain in power. And yet, time after time after time, nobody was willing to make the necessary decision. And President Trump gave him ample time to negotiate. He wasn't kidding around when he said,
well, you would think
need to give up your nuclear weapons.
You would think they would learn after a while when he says something, he means it. You know?
Well, after he bombed their nuclear facilities and after he removed Maduro, you would think they would have got the message.
You would think every leader in the world is saying to himself, let me not mess with this guy right now.
They should have, but they didn't. And they were unwilling to negotiate on their ballistic missiles program. They were unwilling to negotiate on their financing of terrorism. They were continuing to try and rebuild their nuclear ambitions. They slaughtered tens of thousands of their own people in the streets. And I wonder, where are the genocide now people and ceasefire now people that were screaming about Israel in Gaza, and they say nothing. They have nothing to say about the slaughtering of all these people in Iran.
We can get into
because it doesn't fit the narrative. And so here's the fundamental point with all of this. We are taking out their capabilities. We have destroyed their nuclear program.
Right.
We are dismantling their ballistic missiles and air defenses. We are ending the regime as it was, and have eliminated the top leadership of the IRGC. If you look at where things stand, they're acting out belligerently and they're attacking Arab states all around the region. All they're doing is actually fortifying the support within the region.
Well, the region
between the Saudis, the Qataris, the UAE.
The region, if people understand, they're Shia Muslims. The region around them are Sunni Muslims. Yep. I mean, basically, if you look at the countries around them, they're isolated. But without boots on the ground, how do we sustain what we've started over a period of time to actually get the results that we're looking for in Iran and end the terror? You know, it was a big deal when the Shah was in power because, things go on in these countries and people say he was unfair and, he killed a lot of people. And, the Ayatollah came in and took over, again, before you were born. And people, for a while, were like, okay, this is the way it should be. But as they cemented themselves in the Middle East, they became the focus for terror all through the region. Now, everybody around them understands that, okay? How do we maintain what we're doing, what we started, to see the end results of that the actual governing has changed in Iran?
Look, foreign policy doesn't happen in a silo. None of these things are happening in a vacuum, if you will. It's all interconnected.
Okay.
And if you start to dismantle this alliance between China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, Cuba, you're seeing the very aggressive posture that President Trump and the administration is taking. And you juxtapose that to the very weak leadership of Joe Biden that allowed Kabul to fall, that allowed the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that allowed the terrorist attack on Israel, that allowed China to just run rampant around the globe and use economic coercion and seize control of ports and waterways. Everybody laughed at President Trump when he brought up the Panama Canal, and they snickered and they said, "Oh, that's ridiculous."
It's not ridiculous.
What's ridiculous is that we allowed the Chinese to seize control
all through Africa.
Correct.
And so all these precious minerals are being controlled by China.
You're seeing the president take a very aggressive posture. But they are not putting boots on the ground in the way that you saw in Afghanistan or Iraq. Warfare has changed over these last 20 years. Technology has changed. And so the way this war is being conducted is very, very different. But it also shows you the strength of our military and why it is so important to invest in our military. If you want peace and stability, you have to be strong. And the other point here is you have to be willing to strike when your red line has been crossed. Barack Obama was unwilling to do that in Syria, When chemical weapons were used, he was unwilling to do it in Ukraine when Crimea was seized. That level of weakness foments more action by our adversaries. And so President Trump is taking a very tough line, but I think it is one that will prove to be the right course of action. And I do believe that the way to contain Iran, I don't want to see long-term, boots on the ground in Iran. And that is something that Congress would have to be engaged and involved in.
Would they even approve boots on the ground?
No, and I think it would be very difficult to have any sustained military
So
effort
how does that change?
But this is what you're going to see. I mean, look, we're in day 3.
No, I know.
Right?
I know.
So, I mean, this is going to be a very obviously ongoing conversation between the administration and the Congress. We will be getting a classified briefing. We will be having discussions as chair of the Middle East and North Africa. This is something I am very focused on. But I would just kind of reset the picture here a little bit. Think about October 7th and think about where we are today. The world is in a better place today than it was on October 7th, and certainly the Middle East. Hamas and Hezbollah are largely decimated. Assad's regime in Syria has fallen. The Saudis and the Gulf states want to be in a much more normalized relationship with the West, especially economically. And you see Iran, it's a paper tiger. And so ultimately, the president and Bibi Netanyahu both made very important decisions, whether you like them or not. The fact is they were willing to make tough decisions that have laid the foundation for long-term peace and stability in the Middle East. It's not going to happen overnight, but it would never happen with Iran in a powerful position and continuing their reign of terror.
Absolutely bad actors. The question really is, it's a long-term venture into Iran, but hopefully at the end of it, we can neutralize them to be an actor and bring the Middle East, which is a very vibrant area, back into the world market in a peaceful manner. And Israel can exist, as it does.
Look, the only way you could ever do that is by cutting off the head of the snake. And that's what they did.
Okay. So you think that what they did is enough to ignite that complete turnaround eventually?
You're already seeing look at the Saudis. I mean, anybody who has traveled to Saudi Arabia will tell you over the last 5 years, there's been a marked shift culturally in that country, economically. Women are in the workforce. They're now 39% of the workforce. The religious police are basically gone. There are real changes happening in the Middle East, a lot of it driven by economics.
Right.
And they want to be a diversified economy outside of oil. And they want to be involved in AI, and they want to be involved in tech and biotech, and they want to be involved, in terms of greater military cooperation with the United States. None of that can happen if you have the threat of Iran and its terror proxy network. And I think what you're seeing is a unified front. Many of them say what they have to say in their countries. They say what they have to say publicly. But there is a unified front to eliminate these threats.
What I see happening is that you're isolating Iran to basically see if they can survive. I mean, you're cutting off from all their allies and the people around them who, like you said, have to say what they have to say, are realizing that this is a bad actor or know that this is a bad actor, and they want to neutralize that too, I think.
Look, their allies, Russia.
Right.
Okay. It was basically like, new phone, who dis? They did nothing. Oh, we're sorry you're under attack. Good luck.
Right. So I
think, this network is crumbling.
Okay.
But you look at what we've been able to do in a very short period of time, basically taking out their naval fleet. I mean, it's under the sea. It's
Right.
It's gone. So there's more work to do. This is a very aggressive campaign that is being waged. I mean, we literally took out their entire leadership within 40 minutes.
It was very impressive, but there's been a lot of things that Trump has done that have been very, very impressive. And I think it sends a message throughout the world that, listen, we will give you the opportunity to cooperate.
And he did. He gave
absolutely.
everybody the opportunity to negotiate.
But if you do not cooperate, you do it at your own peril. And I think everybody in the world has gotten that message. And we've lacked that for a long, long time. We've actually,
Listen, think about it in this context. If Kamala Harris was president of the United States and was given a choice whether to strike Iran's nuclear facilities, she would choose not to 100 times out of 100 times. She never would have made that decision. And as I said earlier, Republicans and Democrats, everybody said Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Well, they were never going to give it up willingly.
Absolutely.
And you had to make that decision.
Yeah, I think by all accounts it was the right decision, but the precision that it was done in is just amazing. You really don't understand the capabilities of the United States until you see it in action. When you could go down to Venezuela and know that and they know you're coming and pick the guy up and bring him back in, it's almost incredible. I don't even imagine how that was done, but he did it. And I think that was a warning to everybody else in the world that said, listen, if you want to peacefully exist, if you want economic, going forward, if you want your country to grow, economic prosperity, this is what you have to do. And we can all live together. But if you don't, if you want to be a bad actor, we're coming for you. And I think that's the message that he sent. And it's one that I think the whole world is pretty clear on now. So, I agree with what went on. It's amazing how well he did it. And these are the things that you're involved in every day. It's got to be somewhat exciting to be involved in it. And I think you're the right guy at the job. I have a couple more questions.
Yeah,
One
sure.
is, what's the future hold for you? I know, just by knowing you and knowing the people that know you, you were dabbling around with maybe governor of New York State. What's the future for Mike Lawler?
Yeah. When my dad died in 2013, the very last thing he said to me was, to whom much is given, much is required. You've been given a lot of skills and talents. Use them to do God's work. I don't know what the future holds, but I fundamentally believe when opportunities present themselves, you either take them or you don't. And you have to do what you think is right. And, you have to be fully invested in it. And, these jobs are not easy. Being in elected office is a privilege, but it's a commitment. I work 7 days a week. And, there's a lot of time I'm not home with my family. And so, it's not an easy job, but it's something that I'm fully committed to and something that I believe in. And so, I will take it one step at a time. When I evaluated, whether or not to run for governor or continue in Congress, I really, it boiled down to a few things for me. Number one, the issue of family. I spent a lot of time away from home. If I was running for governor, I would almost surely never be home.
Right. Or your family would move to Albany. What are the
Well,
other?
if I won, then I'd see them a lot. But two, I love what I'm doing. I really do love the job. So I was torn from the beginning and never fully invested in running for governor because I really do love what I'm doing. And it boiled down to a question of how, in this moment, can I best serve the people I represent, the state, and the country. And I fundamentally believe the best thing for me to do was to stay in Congress. At the end of the day, if you're up every 2 years, if voters ultimately choose a different path, that's fine. And I respect whatever the outcome is. I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about losing. I'm not worried about winning. I do what I think is right, and I will fight like hell for our community and for our country. If opportunity exists down the road where whether it's U.S. Senate or governor, I'll evaluate it. But if this is the end, it's been a hell of a ride.
No,
so it's I don't worry about what comes next, and I don't worry about winning or losing. I believe if you do the job and you do it well and you show up and you engage and you fight and people see it and you explain and you articulate what you're doing and why, at the end of the day, I think most sensible people throughout the district will say, I may not agree with him on everything, but I know he's fighting for us and I know he's doing a good job. And, I'm fine with whatever happens.
No, we've had this discussion sometimes before. I know you'll be fine whatever happens. I hope you decide to stay in politics and fight for this district and fight for these people.
I have no intention of going anywhere. It's
good.
just but I do believe in politics. Some folks are just I gotta win. I'm not worried about winning. I'm worried about the job that's in front of me and delivering for the people that elected me.
And I think you're different. I think, what I've seen in politics and why people, are not happy with a lot of politicians, because I do think that people go into it most people go into it with the right intentions, but it's a very seductive place to be. Okay. It's like a seductive woman. Once you're there, and it's been evident in Congress that once you're there, there's a lot of benefits. It's an ego boost. Not a lot of people looking to leave. In your case, you have different talents that if you left, you'd be fine. But there are people there that do not want to leave for the simple fact that they've grown accustomed to living this style of life, having people ask them to stand up, patting them on the back, and saying to himself, I like this. I want to be here, and I'll do what I have to stay here. And that's a real problem because you have people in Congress that have been there for 30 years or more.
Look, I think the vast majority of my colleagues are good and decent people. They're smart. They care. They may range in political views, but they do want to get things done, big and small, for their district and for the country. There are others that are there that are simply there because they think it's a reality show, and they conduct themselves like it's a reality show. And I think that has been destructive to the institution and to the country, because those are the people that are getting the most attention and not for the right reasons. And so, I think there are things that do need to change in the institution to make it function better. And I can tell you these conversations happen all the time. People are so frustrated. It's frankly one of the reasons why the turnover is so high, because people are just exasperated by the crazy people, and they've had it. And so, it's a challenge. But that's also why I believe this is not meant to be a career. It's meant to be a service. Serve, fight hard, try to get as much accomplished as you can, and then move on and let the next person come up. And I just believe, I am fully committed to this. And I think folks in my district recognize the difference. We've had many significant members of Congress represent Rockland County, Westchester in the past. And I don't think it's a bearing on who they are as a person, but they wouldn't necessarily show up. They wouldn't necessarily engage. I show up everywhere. I'm in every part of the district tirelessly, and will continue to do that because I fundamentally believe that is a big part of the job, engaging directly with constituents. It's part of the reason why I do town halls.
They want to be part of it. They want to be recognized. They want to make sure you're listening. Whether you do what they say or not is not the ultimate. What they're doing is they want to be heard.
They want to be heard.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to stand there for 2 hours and be screamed at by
I saw
people who, don't like me and don't want to support me and think, bad of me. But I am willing to do that because that is part of the job.
Mike, I really appreciate you doing Bare Wires with me. And,
this was great.
I look forward to doing another one. I know you're in the middle of a lot of stuff, and I know we have the right guy doing this, so thank you very much.
I will tell you, I've done a lot of interviews over the last 3 years, and
I'm sure
you've done better than most of them in terms of getting right to it. I love it.
I don't look to have a confrontation. I really wanted to show people where you came from. You're such a young guy, and you've made such great strides. Other people who listen to the podcast, my podcast is based on these experiences and helping other people learn these experiences and seeing what you can do.
Yeah.
You've done some great things, and you're an inspiration to a lot of young people. So I hope they watch it, and I hope they get that inspiration.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you very
Brian.
much.